Okay, to repeat myself, philosophy is figuring stuff out logically, but without machinery. One of the differences between philosophy and physics is that a physicist who wants to test a question of physical law can write a grant request to have some machinery built. What's the most important physics machinery in existence today? Does anyone know? Most important bit of physics gear?
Scales.
Say again?
Scales.
Scales? No, we know how they work. All the experiments that have been done could be done with scales. They're already been done. Scales are very well understood. Think bigger.
Computers.
Nope. No, physics.
Atom splitter.
Atom splitter, exactly. What's the biggest atom splitter in the world?
Hadron Collider.
Say?
Hadron Collider.
The Hadron Collider, yeah, that's right, the Large Hadron Collider. You know, it goes around, I guess it goes around saying, are you a hadron? And if it's and you say, no, not a hadron, okay, no, sorry, what? Are you a hadron? Yes, bam! Collide with them. No? Okay, so the Large Hadron Collider, very, very expensive piece of machinery to settle a question of physical law. Questions of the nature of reality, the nature of existence, the nature of knowledge, moral questions cannot be settled by machinery. We cannot build a machine to investigate the fundamental basis of morality. What we have to do is sit down and think about it and try and think logically about it. In philosophy, philosophy is the area where you figure stuff out logically, but without machinery. So the big thing about philosophy is the use of logic. There are other disciplines and traditions in the world that talk about moral issues or the nature of reality or other stuff like that, the stuff that philosophy talks about. But if they don't do it logically, they're not doing philosophy. So when we get to the rules of philosophy, I'm going to start talking about that. Right, so this is what I'm trying to introduce you to do, is to get an accurate idea of what philosophy is. Right, this logical thinking stuff about fundamental issues. And I'll let that sit for now. Now I'm going to talk about, I'm going to try and go over the syllabus. Right. Come in, there's still floor space. You can sit down, and people who are going to add the class will come and see me.
Style?
Yeah. Okay, so, any questions so far? Yes, is there anyone who does not have a syllabus yet?
Is the sign-in sheet?
Yes, that's the sign-in sheet.
I need that.
They're going to come to, there'll be a short break while people sign in and get syllabuses who don't have them. Dun, 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 da, 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 dun, 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 dun.
Music that drives people to suicide.
Actually, why don't you take that away and sort of pass it around? So if you pass that to someone and take it sort of out of shot, out of camera range, and then there's I'm going to give you a stack. So I'm going to approach this gentleman. Is anyone over there short of syllabus? There we go. All right. So, okay. So there's a textbook required. Right. You can use any edition. There's also online reading is required. You know, I gave the fellow a little stack of them for that. This is going so well. I've got such control of my classroom. Right. I'm going to put this down under weirdnesses, because one of the weirdnesses of this class is online reading. Normally a class has a textbook and maybe some online supplements. This class has 3 online readings. One for this week, which is kind of optional, because it's going to be the substance of my first lecture, and I'm just going to give it here, and you can go back and read the online stuff or not. That's madwizard.com rules HTM, and madwizard.com intro00.htm, which is basically sort of catch-up material for the first class. For next week, I'm doing an experiment. I haven't done this before. I haven't tried this for a long time. I'm going to ask you to read translated Greek philosophy. That is an actual Socratic dialogue where Socrates, who's basically the first philosopher in the sense that we use the word now, had a conversation with some people. And it may be easy to understand. It may be hard to understand. It may be confusing. So I'm going to try and write some reading help to go with that. That would be intro01.htm. You can see on there's that. I haven't actually written that yet. Right now your assignment is to read, is to go to a web page that I created and read all the stuff that's printed in red, which is Socrates discussing something with a guy called Theaetetus. I don't know how to say it. Right. And then another dialogue where you want to read stuff that will be in brown. And we'll go over that. We'll be dealing with that next week. And there is one page in Does the Center Hold, but you don't. That's actually online somewhere. Should be a link to it. I think there's a link to it from the thing, but you don't need to read that text. Did that make sense to anyone?
No, sort of.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want you to read part of the Theaetetus and part of the Meno, and we'll have a quiz. Okay, here's the second weirdness. All right, we have the online readings. Not all the reading is online. There's textbook reading, but we do have some reading online, some of which I wrote. Okay, here's what's going to happen next week. Next week, you're going to come in and you sit down in class, and I'm going to be writing questions on the board. There'll be questions about the Theaetetus and the questions about the Meno. And I'm going to try and make those questions, I'm going to try and make the questions be such that if you've done the reading, they'll be really easy. If you haven't done the reading, they'll be impossible. Now, I may not succeed in this because this is the first time I've used original texts in this way. So what I'm going to do is, if this quiz turns out to be a disaster, right? If next week's quiz turns out to be a disaster, and virtually no one gets any of the questions right, and I'm looking at them and going, oh gosh, oh dear, I'll end up just giving everybody 5 points for the quiz. Now, the reason for this is I have these reading quizzes, and there'll be reading quizzes throughout the class. Right? Every day that we don't have an exam, there'll be a reading quiz. Because one of the things that makes philosophy hard to teach, or any subject hard to teach, is students don't do the reading. So what I've tried to do, and I probably haven't succeeded for next week or the week after that, but what I try to do, at least when we're reading the Donald Palmer book, is make the reading short, relatively easy, give you a lot of reading help, and expect you to do it. Have you ever had a class where you had to read like 4 chapters for next week? What's the point of that? I try to give you 12 pages. And they're easy pages. The book is like, well, you'll see, it's got pictures in it. It's got pictures, it's got little sketches that he drew, and they take up space and they're mildly amusing and stuff. So, if I give you 5 to 12, or let me see what pages like this. 55 to 71, that's like 17 pages, and half of that's pictures. So that should be fairly doable.
Would the pages be the same no matter what edition you get?
When I give you if you go to the web pages, it's required that you go to the web pages, Intro 01, Intro 02, HTML, and so on. That will give the page, see the colors, see that one's got a blue cover, hold that up. Right, which edition is that? Is it fifth? Fifth. Okay, 5th edition, blue letters, blue numbers. 6th edition, red numbers. That's at the beginning, and it's spelled out in the instructions there. So, you find that you read the red numbers, and there should be some questions about the text, and you look around those pages and you can find it. You should be able to figure it out. That's been my policy since, like, I was teaching I started with the 2nd edition, and then they changed edition. It's like, well, you've changed the page numbers, but not much else. So, okay, here's the page numbers from that edition, and here's the page numbers from the 4th edition. I think the 3rd edition is a bit shaky, but 5th and 4th should be okay. Should definitely be okay. And you shouldn't have to spend, well. So anyway, textbooks are too expensive. So I'm trying to. So if you have any problems, it's on the syllabus, but just to make sure you know it, SQUIPTRYX@gmail.com, and I get my email on my smartphone. This is why I actually got a smartphone, so I could get email from students. So I can usually respond within 24 hours. Sometimes I'll respond within minutes. It just depends. Am I on the computer? Am I by my phone? Do I have 5 minutes? Am I walking the dog? I'm walking the dog, exploring. I'll check my email. So you can always ask me questions with that. Does that make sense? By the way, that was a great question. Absolutely amazing question. Really good question to start. All right. So, required. I put this thing in about academic honesty because over the last few years I've caught 1 or 2 cheats per semester, and it's always very upsetting to me, and when I'm upset I lash out. So this is skulls up here, little skulls. I won't tell you where they came from, but those students will never cheat again. But I have a 300-point penalty for cheating in my class, and I've imposed it numerous times. There's a 3-part Odyssey writing assignment, which is described later in the semester. But the point of the Odyssey assignment is for you to do some thinking and report on the results of your thinking. Then I look at the results of your thinking and I tell you to think about something more deeply. I take what you said and say, well, look, this part's shaky, or this part's not supported by evidence. Here you make a dodgy inference or a dodgy claim. I want to say, can you prove this? One of the things that really drives me insane about popular culture is that the word philosophy is used to mean something that is very much the opposite of philosophy. There's a TV show, or there used to be a TV show called Criminal Minds, and they had one character who was supposed to be a genius, and he's got all these degrees, doctorates in all kinds of different things, and then he goes back to school and he says, I'm studying philosophy. And he says, I like philosophy because in philosophy there are no wrong answers. I wanted to reach through the television set, just reach through, grab his little scrawny neck and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze until his eyes popped up and you hear this very satisfying crunch as his throat collapses. That's what I wanted to do at this point, because that's the opposite of philosophy. Oh, there's no wrong answers. No, that's television or the internet. That's not philosophy. In philosophy, there are a lot of wrong answers, and we're going to be talking about wrong answers all the way through the semester. It's hard to figure out what the right answer is. Philosophical questions are usually very difficult questions, and there's a lot of thinking involved. But there are wrong answers in philosophy. We're going to look at some very notable, historically important wrong answers, answers that are clearly wrong. There's this thing in the world, have you ever heard us say, well, my philosophy is like the universe is ruled by intelligent pieces of cheese. And everyone goes, oh, okay. And nobody goes, that's moronic. Well, the person who says that's moronic is the actual philosopher. You know, if someone says, well, this is my philosophy, I'm like this, and, you know, Hakuna Matata, or whatever that is, Matata, which is actually okay, I mean, as long as it involves alcohol, I'm for it. But, you know, to say I have a philosophy here, and, well, okay, that's just, technically that's a belief system. You can believe anything you like. Anyone can believe anything they like. Don't call it philosophy if it's not based on logic, if it's not based on evidence. If it's not logically sound, it's not philosophy. If you're not, philosophy is not a thing, it's not a set of beliefs. Philosophy is a practice, it's a way of approaching the world. It's something people do. And it has results. Philosophy is like science. Okay? In science, there are right answers and wrong answers. In science, we know that the planets are not suspended in giant spheres of transparent material, the crystal spheres. We don't believe that anymore because science has given us logical reasons for thinking that it's not true. Philosophy works the same way, except the philosophy is more difficult. Why is philosophy more difficult than physics? Because when you have a difficult question in philosophy, you cannot build a machine to settle that question. There's no Large Hadron Collider for philosophy. We are just fallible human beings trying to work things out logically. And that leads to the question of grading. When you write your paper, do you have to give the right answer? In the Odyssey paper, right? Because all of the questions I give you, they got right and wrong answers, right? If you write a paper, do you have to give the right answer? Well, yes.
Not necessarily, as long as you have something to back what you're thinking.
Right, it's exactly right. As long as you back up what you say as well as you can. The Odyssey paper, I should write this down. Odyssey paper. An Odyssey paper, in the Odyssey paper, I am asking you to demonstrate a thinking process, a rational thinking process. Not necessarily a correct thinking process, although, you know, that would be nice, nothing wrong with that. But if you are honestly struggling with the material and honestly trying to get to the answer, to the right answer, you get good grades. If you use bad logic to support an answer that makes you feel good, but which you can't support logically, that's not so good. Now, it sometimes happens that people will make one little mistake at the beginning of the paper and then no more mistakes, but because they made that one mistake starting out, everything's going in the wrong direction. Right? So what happens there? How do I grade that? Well, I can see, you know, if you made, ooh, horrible logical error at the beginning of your paper. Oh, that's not, yeah, well, okay, that's a good inference, that's a good inference, good inference, good inference. You know, you're thinking logically from then on. What I used to do when the papers came in on actual physical paper, I would write on it, you are, if it was the rest of the paper was good, I would write on it, you are completely wrong. But there's a lot of good thinking here, 100 out of 100. You can get 100 out of 100 for a paper that I think is completely wrong if you're backing it up, right? You're giving reasons for what you believe. You are engaging in the material, right? You're using good logical practices. You're trying to draw inferences from evidence and that kind of stuff. You're trying to think independently and critically. Right. That's another word that's complicated. That's often independent thinking. What does the word? What does a professor mean or a teacher mean when they say, "I want you to think independently"? Well, it depends on the teacher, doesn't it? Right. I have heard of teachers who will say, "I want you to think independently," which means give me back my opinions, but pretend that you came to those conclusions all by yourself. In other words, prove me right. And if you prove me wrong, don't bother turning the paper in because you'll fail. So what I'm saying is I want you to think independently. I want you to disagree with me if you think the evidence supports the other side. A lot of times you won't even know what my opinion is. Right? And I'm not going to grade based on my opinion. I'm going to grade based on how logically you approach things or how careful your thinking is. Right? And by the way, you know, if you make logical mistakes in your paper, that doesn't mean there's necessarily a problem as long as you're trying to think logically. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. You know, if I think you've made a fallacious inference, I'm going to point it out. But if it's, you know, if you're doing reasoning, it's like, okay, there's some credit there. I never take points off. Right? If you write an 8-page paper, which you don't have to, and usually you wouldn't, but if you wrote an 8-page paper for my class, and 2 pages of it were good reasoning, and the rest was complete rubbish, I would grade you based on the 2 good pages, and I would just ignore the rest. Right? If you write stuff that doesn't make sense, well, you don't get credit for it. It's like a blank space. But I'm not going to take, if you write, ooh, this is all very good. Oh, but this is terrible. So I'll give 100 points for this, but I'll take away 50 because he wrote this terrible stuff. I'm not going to do that. Right? I want you to be willing to take chances and, you know, write out what you think. Say?
So you're not afraid of the penalty, so you're allowing yourself to push all the way.
Yes, exactly, and I want that. There's another thing in the Odyssey. Now, there's no extra credit in this class. However, when you do the Odyssey paper, you're supposed to have 3 papers, right? At the end of the semester, there's 3 graded papers. But there's the option to do 1 or 2 more. And so there'll be 5 papers. You turned in 5 papers. And the reason you would do that is if you got a rubbish grade for your first paper, and a mediocre grade for your second paper, and a good grade for your third paper, you might turn in 1 or 2 more. Now you've got the hang of it, and you know how to write a good paper. You might turn in 1 or 2 more that would get good grades. And so what happens is at the end of the semester, if you turned in 5 papers, I look at those papers and I take out the worst grade and the second worst grade. Take out the second worst grade, and I take the 3 best grades. So you have to do 3 Odyssey papers. If you do more than 3, I take the 3 best. Right. So I drop out the other 2. The optional ones can replace your worst previous paper if the optional one is better. So you can't hurt your grade by doing an extra paper, and you can improve it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because the reason I do this is I work very hard to make my instructions clear and explicit. When you go to the website and you look at the Odyssey instructions that I've written out there, you'll find there's lots and lots of instructions. Do this, do this, do this. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Do it this way, do it that way. People still misunderstand. And if you misunderstand the instructions the first time around and write a paper that turns out to be terrible, you're not saddled with that grade, because then I can talk to you and say, no, when I said to do X, what I meant to do was for you to do X, right? This thing I told you to do, I actually meant for you to do it. Every so often I have a student who says, oh, but you know, when you said to do that, I didn't think you meant it. Right? Or that's not, or sometimes people don't even read the instructions. I do have people who will, they'll look at the list of topics, they'll pick a topic, they'll do what they did for their last English class or whatever other class they had before, and they turn it in, and then they get it back, and they say, why do I have an F on this paper? And I say, well, because I told you to do this, this, and this, and you didn't do any of that. Right? Or you did this thing wrong or this thing wrong. And like, oh, you know, you didn't do what I asked. Okay, the next paper they do what I asked and they get a better grade. Hopefully. So, is that making sense for the writing assignment? Okay. And that's referenced online. There's actually 2 web pages on my website. There's odyssey.htm and introodyssey.htm. And the links should be here. All right.
It's on the date section.
It's on what?
The date section,
Oh, the date section.
red cord sketches.
Okay, well, I've got this thing here. It says www.odyssey/introodyssey.htm. I don't see the one that's just Odyssey. So I'm going to give you that link right now. And I'm going to give it to you in green so it sticks out. Write down this link. www.odyssey.com/odyssey.htm. And that's all lowercase. All of my URLs are lowercase. All my file names. So Odyssey, you know the right, you know the book by Homer. Right. Yes, sir.
Not the introodyssey.htm?
No, that one as well. Add
So they're
that
just,
one.
they're 2 different
There's
ones.
2 things. This is the general instructions for all Odysseys. Introodyssey.htm is the list of topics. And I'm actually going to be going in there and adding a couple more topics. There's about 30 or 40 topics listed there. And I'll probably be adding a couple more topics. And hey, if you can think up another topic to add in, hey, you know, email me and suggest it, and we can use that. All right, so we started at 6:30. It's now 7 o'clock. My God, it's only 7 o'clock. Hey, we're getting on. So there's 2 closed book midterms, in-class midterms. If you look at the intro, the intro 00, intro 01, intro 02, intro 03, there will be at least for the intro 01 and on, there will be potential exam questions. So you will have an idea of what the exam questions will be like before the exam. So there's sort of like, you can study for the exam by looking at these questions and figuring out how to. I do essay exams where I'm asking you to explain a doctrine and its criticisms or something like that to demonstrate you understand a set of related arguments. When I hand out the exam, there will be at least 2 and usually 3 choices of questions for each section. So for the first exam, I think there'll be like 4 sections. I might do 3 sections, I don't know. But say there'll be 4 sections. The first section will have 3 questions. You answer one of those. The second section will have 2 questions. You answer one of those. So that if you study one part of the material for that week, I don't test you just on the other part. Have you ever had that? You study 3/4 of the material and you get it down cold, and the only question on the exam is on the quarter that you didn't study or that you didn't get. Right? And sometimes there'll be bits you get and bits you don't get. And I want to be able to say that you'll have a question on the bits that you do get. Does that make sense? Right? Because in philosophy, these things you have to understand the ins and outs of arguments. And nobody's going to understand everything. But some of you will understand some things and others understand other things. And then getting the extra questions will be do that. So you got the choices. Okay. There will be the reading quizzes, and again, right, for next week I want you to read the Theaetetus, and I will ask you questions on the Theaetetus, and I'm going to try to have reading questions ready for you. And in fact, I'm going to try and do that tomorrow. I was going to say I'll start tonight, but when I get home tonight, well, it's asleep. I'm just going to collapse. I know. But I'm going to try and get up early tomorrow and make up reading questions for the Theaetetus and say, well, what is this, and what is that? And also for the Meno. And then I'm going to write a quiz that will hopefully be an easy quiz for everyone who's done the reading. Well, basically, the way I grade the quiz is, if your answer demonstrates that you did the reading, you get the points. If your answer demonstrates that you did the reading but didn't understand it, you get the points. Right? A wrong answer, for the reading quizzes, a wrong answer is usually just as good as a right answer, providing it's a wrong answer that shows you did the reading. Right? If you did the reading and didn't understand it, and you go gobble, and it's like, okay, yeah, but okay. Because that's what it's about, is demonstrating that you've done the reading, not necessarily demonstrating that you understood it perfectly, but demonstrating that you did it. Right? So that you've got that already loaded in, and you've got a basis for understanding the lecture. And to repeat, I've never done it with the readings before. Yeah?
Right here you have page 48. Do we read that page too?
Page 48 in the Palmer book. I think I've put it, send me an email. If you don't have the book, send me an email. Actually, go to,
You said it's on.
send me an email, and I will put up a link, probably from Intro 1 HTM, to a picture, because I took a photo of that page, and I put it up on the web somewhere. I just can't remember where I put it. All right, so if you can find it, yeah. But reading page 48 will not be necessary to pass the quiz. I don't remember. Because page 48 is basically about Meno and the Socrates and the slave boy. And it's Donald Palmer's description of Socrates and the slave boy, which is, not as interesting. Doesn't this sound like a gay porno? Seriously. I mean, I'm always uncomfortable when I teach the Meno, because, well, the Socrates said this, and they asked the slave boy a question, don't you think it's this? And the slave boy said this. I'm like, I just hope nobody's outside of the corridor listening to this. So,
Can I ask a silly question?
yes.
Is the Mad Wizard your webpage? Will you refer to
Yes.
your webpage?
Madwizard.com is my website.
Did you say my webpage? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, that's right. It's mine. It's all mine. I own it. I own the URL. It's mine. Yeah. That's me. All right. Follow the academic honesty. Okay. I go by a point system. Right. And quizzes are 12 at 5 points each. Usually pretty easy. Midterms are 100 points each. There's 2 midterms. Finals are 100 points. By the way, the final is not cumulative. I do not do a cumulative final. I hate cumulative finals. Right? I do it unit by unit by unit. The final is just simply the last exam. It's not worth any more, and I don't really like harkening back to earlier parts of the
Will you go over again, you were saying that there's going to be so many questions, and then so many essays? What was that?
Well, what happens is usually, all right, there will be this exam sheet, right, with some instructions at the top that nobody reads, and then there'll be like 1, 2, 3 sections, and then there'll be like question 1, question 2, question 3, and the same for right, so there's 4 sections, and each section has 2 or 3 questions. And then you read these, for the first section, you read each of these questions, and you pick the one that you think you can do best on, so that's number 2. Then for the next one, you pick the one you can do best on, and the next one, and the next one. And then, right, 4 sections, you do 4 questions. There's 12 questions on the paper, but you only do 4. Because it may be that this question asks about something you just never understood, or that I didn't explain clearly. But this one asks about something you understand very well. So if I just have this question on the exam, you're screwed. So, did that make sense? That helped. So, and the other thing, oh, I stole someone's marker. Oh, well. This is probably from a completely different school, let alone, right. I forgot to print wrangling survey things. I was supposed to have a survey form that I would give you guys, and you put it. What I'll do is I'll email the form out to you, and I'll have some printed, and I'll collect them next week. Right, so I just got to remember to do that. So I'll email out these. I'm going to email out these survey forms, and I'll have you print them out and fill them out at your leisure. All right. Thing about wrangling, it's really easy to do, but really difficult to explain. What's going to happen with the wrangling, it's going to be kind of like a debate, only much more logical. And you'll be in a team, and the reason we have the survey forms is so I can assemble teams, but you'll be on a team defending a proposition, and you make one point, then the other side has to respond to your point, and then the other side, then you respond to that point. But I'll be up here telling you what to do all the time. So, and it's kind of sort of relaxing after the exam. After we have the midterm, a first midterm and second midterm, we'll be doing this wrangling exercise. And what it is a demonstration of a thinking process, of how a logical thinking process actually goes. So it's not really for the people up here. The people up here are volunteers helping me demonstrate something for the rest of the class. So I'm going to want the rest of the class to attend and pay very, very careful attention to what's going on. As far as your participation, this is participation graded, which means if you're up here doing your best to participate, to do what I'm asking you to do, you get the points. You earn the points just by being up here and doing your best. And if you end up doing a terrible job of it, no problem. Right? If you end up not saying a word, if all you do is like give moral support to the other people on your team, no problem. You get the full points. Right? Because you're up here and you're working and you're doing something and you're helping me. Me do this thing, wrangling. I have only ever given less than full points once. There was only ever one student that I didn't give the full points to because he wouldn't stay on topic and he wouldn't shut up. Even when he sat down, he kept talking, saying the same inane things. So I was really not happy. It was not cooperative. So that's the wrangling thing. It's something you don't understand, but you don't have to worry about it. And you'll understand it once we start doing it. You go, oh, this is easy. Okay. So I use a point system. Notice the 300-point penalty for cheating, because when people cheat, I take it. Okay, I have one little extra credit thing. If your first Odyssey is received a full week ahead of the first Odyssey deadline, which is the first Odyssey extra credit deadline plus 5 points, September 9th. If you get your first paper in before September 9th, you get an extra 5 points. And the reason I do that is I want people to get started early on the papers. Right? Because there will be some people who don't get started early on the papers. And if you do brilliant, right, if you're running late and you do brilliantly on all 3 papers, no problem. But if you're running late and you do terribly on 2 of the 3 papers, you're not going to have time to do another Odyssey stage. And you will have a bad grade when you could have had a good grade. Right? Does that make sense? Right. So you get the Odyssey, the writing in. Ideally, I would like to have all the Odysseys done by the end of October. Right. What's the penalty for late papers? There isn't one. Right. Have you ever seen there's a meme floating about, a picture with it, this shows a comfortable looking professor sitting in his office, and it says, doesn't accept late papers, takes 5 weeks to grade them and get them back to you. Right. If you had professors like that?
Yes.
Okay, I try not to be like that. I usually have I have 6 classes this semester, and I might get another one. So I'm going to have a huge amount of work to do at certain points in the semester. But I try to get the papers back to you so you have time. I have maybe about like 1 week or 2 week turnaround. 2 weeks would be really not good. So I try to work on the turnaround. My phone, by the way, my phone number's in here somewhere. Yeah, right up at the top. That's my personal phone number. It's not an office number. These are marvelous devices. This has an application in it that turns the ringer off at 10 o'clock at night and keeps it turned off until 9 o'clock the following morning. So if you send me a text at 3 a.m., you will not wake me up. But the next morning, I'll go, well, maybe the next morning, maybe 2-3 days from now, because I don't always check. Oh, I've got a text. Oh, wow, right? If you sent me an email 2 days ago and I haven't answered, send me a text that says, check email, or I emailed you. Come on, do that.
So it's okay to send something at 3 o'clock in the morning if we're working and thinking and you'll
Yes,
get it
absolutely.
later? Okay.
Email is even better, because email is time displaced. I don't get a notification when I get an email. Right, so my ringer is turned off at night, always. There's a machine that takes care of it. You can even call and leave a voicemail. I hate voicemail, but you can if you like. By the way, text is better because then I will have your phone number. I've had before smartphones, I would get phone call. I'd check my answering machine, and I'd have this long rambling, this is your class, and I was wondering about this, and I was wondering, and I wanted to know, could I do this instead of that? And I said, you call me back at It wasn't a number, it was a blur. And I once played the same message 5 times, and I could not distinguish a single number in that phone number. I was like, well, no, So if you leave your phone number on an answering machine, say it very slowly. Pause between each number. That way the person can call you back. All right. So academic honesty policy. I want you, all your assignments go to Turnitin, which checks for plagiarism. Um, Sexual harassment discrimination policy. This school is, at least from my perspective, seems to be right on top of the sexual harassment and other kinds of harassment and non-discrimination stuff. I've had to go to seminars and things and stuff like that. I want to tell you that the social science division, to my experience, has a very good dean. I've brought several students to her who are having problems of one kind or another, and if you're having any kind of problem, you'll get a sympathetic hearing from Dean DeMarchi. She's very good, she's very fair. You know, you may not get the result that you want, but she will listen to you and she will do the appropriate thing. She knows the college rules very well, and she's very sympathetic. She's a good listener. She maintains confidentiality. So if you're having any kind of trouble with another student or with a professor or anything, go and see Dean DeMarchi, or you can come see me and I'll take you to Dean DeMarchi. I'll try and help too, but mainly my only means, if I'm helping you with something, pretty much always I'll be taking, if it's not this class, pretty much always I'll be taking you down to see Dean DeMarchi. I'll be taking you down to see Nina. Being a white male with an English accent, there's a huge aspect of experience that I never see. I have female friends who tell me about stuff that happened to them, and I go, I never see that. And I say, you're a guy. And an English accent too, which means that Americans treat me better than they treat Americans. Score.
Where are you from?
I'm from the south of England, Farnborough in Hampshire. 30 years ago, so my accent is weird now.
A little mixture.
Yeah. Drop policy, if you drop the class, filing the paperwork is your responsibility. Students who just quit coming, that's not dropping the class, by the way. Someone tells you they dropped the class, and you ask them, when did you file the paperwork? And they say they didn't. They haven't dropped the class, they just quit coming. That's not called dropping the class, it's called failing the class. Right. Students who just quit coming usually get an F. College policy is you may be dropped if you miss more than a few classes. Trouble is, I've dropped people and they show up the next week. Why did you drop me? I'm staying in the class. Then I've had people who say, I'm going to miss a class next week, but don't drop me, don't drop me. I'm going to finish this class, I'm going to finish it. And I go, I won't drop you, and I don't drop you, and I never see them again. And they get an F, which I don't care about because they said they were coming back. 300-point penalty for dishonesty. Bring everything to class. Don't be late if you can help it. If you are late, come in quietly. You know, take your seat. I've had people stay out. Hello. I've had people stand outside the door, looking in through the window because they were late. There's actually a seat there. There's an empty seat. Oh my God, there's an empty seat right there. Who will claim it? Okay, Battle Royale.
You should bring everything to class and include the text.
Yes, I want you to bring the text to class. Well, I would like you to bring the class. Sometimes people, you know, they have a question about the paper and they don't have their paper with them. They don't have a copy with them. I'm like, well, I can't, you know, show me what you wrote because I need to see what you wrote. I used to have, haven't happened for a while, I used to have people tell me they wanted to write on topics off of the list, a non-list topic, and I'd always say, well, send me an email or write down your thesis and your reasons for thinking this thesis, and any objections you can think of to your thesis, and whatever you can do like that. And what they do, either they ignore me and they go ahead and write on that unapproved topic, because they haven't gotten approval yet, right? They said, can I write on this topic? And I say, well, if you show me what you have in mind, I'll think about it. And they interpret that as yes. So they do that, and they get an F, and then they're upset with me. Right? And they get an F because they didn't understand what they were doing. And don't ever show me an outline. If you want help with your paper, write the paper and show me the paper. That's the best way to get help. And in fact, that's how the Turnitin system works. Did that make sense? I hate outlines. I don't see anything.
Even if you're proposing a topic?
Yeah, but you don't give me an outline of your paper, because that says, well, here I'm going to talk about the thesis, and here I'm going to talk about the argument of the thesis, and I'll say, wait a minute, what is that argument? Oh, I haven't done that yet.
I see, okay.
Yeah, outlining, I mean, if you need to do outlining to get ready to write a paper, sure, go ahead, whatever works for you. But your paper should actually have arguments in it. Well, that's all in this thing here about how to write the paper. By the way, if you read this and the stuff you don't understand, that's the perfect kind of thing to ask questions in class, particularly at the beginning of class, because if there's something you don't understand, chances are half the rest of the class doesn't understand it either. Now, talking of not understanding. If I write something on the board, or I say something in class that 60% of the class doesn't understand, whose fault is that? Who's mistaken, who's gone wrong?
The student for another reason.
60% of the class does not understand what I'm saying.
Oh.
It's my fault, right? If I write something on the board 60% of the class doesn't understand, I've written it wrong.
Oh.
Right? I'm supposed to put up stuff that you guys can understand. Not necessarily easily, but understandable. So ideally I should give you material that with a little work you can master. Right? And philosophy is weird. Philosophy is different. Philosophy is something that's very different from the way people are socialized to think. I had a really disturbing experience last semester in the spring. We were talking about English classes and in interpretation, reading. And a student told me that he had had an English teacher tell him that the way to understand a paragraph is to sort of skim over the paragraph and then try to see what he felt the paragraph was saying. And I said, no, that's not what you do. And I asked, did anybody else have this? And nobody put up their hand, so maybe there's just one bad English teacher out there. But that's not what you do. You know how you read a paragraph is you read the first word, then the second word, then the third word. If you get to a comma, you pause a little bit. Then fourth word, fifth word, right? And then you get to the full stop, the period. Then you look at the whole thing you've read and you try and figure out what it means based on the words in it, the meanings of the words in it, and how they're arranged in the sentence. Once you understand the first sentence, you go on and do the second sentence. Once you get to the end of the paragraph, you try to figure out what the whole paragraph's about based on the explicit meanings of the sentences there. Right? I've had people interpret things by skimming for key words and then fitting those key words together. And the time I saw that happen, a little group of students got the meaning of the paragraph exactly backwards. They had it saying the opposite of what it actually said. So reading is careful. You've got to read very carefully. And when we do the rules of philosophy, I'll be emphasizing that. Right. Oh yeah, remind me to turn off my cell phone, because I often forget, and sometimes it rings, and you will hear my novelty ringtones. Okay. Disabled students and services. A student, basically, in my view, a disabled student is a student who, for whatever reason, needs help handling exams and other tasks related to education. If you need to take the test in the Roosevelt Center, I had one student who would take all the quizzes in the Roosevelt Center because she needed a distraction-free environment. That's fine, right? We want to work this out so that everybody can succeed in the class, that there's no impediment. So if you have a disability or you need an accommodation for any other reason or any other problem related to the class, email me or talk to me after class or at break, right? So that we can get you through the class, so that if you can succeed, you do, right? Did that make sense? Right. Right, so there's this boilerplate in here about this. I already talked about the writing assignment. You notice that there's the Turnitin information here. So I want you all to register with Turnitin. Is anyone here who's never used Turnitin before?
Never.
Used? All right. Go to Turnitin.com and it should be easy to work out. I also have a little thing I wrote a couple of years ago, Turnitin.htm, on my website that explains some things, and hopefully it will not confuse you more. Sometimes what I write confuses people more, but that'll be it. And if you have a problem, you can email me. It's the beginning of the semester here, and at another class, another school, so I'm getting a lot of emails from students with problems, and that's all right. All right. Again, late papers are accepted. There's no penalty for late papers, but do the papers all as soon as you can, because that works to your benefit in terms of being able to succeed. If you're brilliant and you do the papers early, you've got them out of the way. If you're not brilliant, or you mess up a paper and you do them early, well, you've got time for a do-over. And I want you to have those do-overs. Okay. Right, so we got the Odyssey due dates here, and the Odyssey due dates also appear over here, so it's all like clear. And this is the class schedule, the units, the dates. Right, this is the due date. You have to have all the reading done before that date, because that's the time we do it. Remember, we got this reading quiz before lecture. You'll come into class, and I'll ask you to do a quiz. And that's sort of the topic. We're talking about midwifery and 8 ideas and soul. This is the stuff we're taking out of Plato. And again, this is experimental. Do the best you can with reading the Theaetetus and the Meno. Right, do the best you can to work your way through them. Oh, I've got to warn you. I don't know if anyone's told you this yet, but the internet is wrong.
I would say why, but okay.
Or I should say usually, or almost always. I mean, the internet is sometimes right. For instance, the pages I wrote are on the internet. So that bit of the internet is right. But usually the internet is wrong. Particularly on philosophical issues. There is more absolute rubbish on the internet now than there was. You know, before internet, there was a certain amount of rubbish. It took 3,000 years, 4,000 years to write a certain amount of rubbish about philosophy. The internet has like quadrupled that amount. It's just absolute freaking nonsense on the internet. And I will tell you this because every so often I have a student or two who decides, I'm not going to read the text and figure out what it means. I'm going to Google it and have someone else tell me something wrong. And then I'll say that that's my thinking, and then I'll get an F. I don't know why they do it. I mean, maybe they think it's going to be right. But I once had an argument with a student. Instead of writing the paper on his own thinking, which is what you're told to do in every paper in every class, instead of writing a paper about his own thinking, he went to a web page, Googled a web page, came to a random web page, and these guys said this, and he comes and this guy says this, and this guy says this, and this guy says this. And I said, well, you got 0 points here because you just told me what some other guy says. But he says, but look, he really believes this. I can't help that he's a moron. You know, the internet does not have a moron filter. Right? There's nothing that's on the computer that goes, oh, you're a moron. Hey, my keyboard won't work. No, keyboards work for morons. Right? Which explains again the internet. So the, and I really had to just, well, I just kept saying, no, you don't do that, no, you don't do that. And it was really uncomfortable. But telling me what some idiot on the internet says is not the way to succeed in philosophy. Telling me what you personally think is what you need to do. Right? And you know, think as well as you can. But if your own thinking is mediocre, it's going to be better than 99% of the internet. Right? So, and that's one of the reasons I want you guys to be relaxed. I want you to see me as a warm, welcoming, supportive presence. I guess that ship sailed. But you know, it's someone you can talk to, where it's okay to take a chance. It's okay to be wrong. I'm not going to yell at you if you're wrong. You know, you might get a bad grade, but I'm not going to be mean to you about it. I don't know if that helps. Okay. So, all right. So there's an important thing. The last important thing on the syllabus is that there's a difference between judgment and opinion. Opinion is whatever anyone happens to think. You can think anything you like. In fact, you have a moral right to think anything you want to think. It's your choice as to what you think. It's one of the fundamental moral rights, in my view, is an individual's right to choose what he or she thinks. You can believe whatever you want to believe. But simply believing something doesn't give you warrant to assert that it's true. You can assert that you believe it, and that's fine. But you can't assert that other people should believe it merely because you believe it. Now, there's this thing called judgment. A judgment is when you've looked at the evidence and the available arguments, whatever's been said so far, and you've taken all the evidence that's offered, all the things that are claimed to be offered, all the factual claims, and looked at the basis for those factual claims, and thought through them as logically as you can, and that's a judgment. A judgment is something based on an honest and thoughtful and careful attempt to think logically. And so what this class is about is judgment. You can have any opinion you like, and you can express your opinions in your papers. You can express your opinions in class. It doesn't get you credit. It's not whatever random philosophy is not whatever random things anybody happens to think for whatever emotional reason they have, or whatever reason cultural reason they happen to think it. It's about thinking logically about evidence. Does that make sense? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys have a break for 15 minutes. It's okay if you're a couple of minutes late. How about we meet back here at 10 to 8? Let's make it 5 to 8. Sometime between 10 to 8 and 5 to 8, come back here and sit down.